Robert Mueller's partisan hunt, and guess what? It has nothing to do with Russia collusion. Nothing. Paul Manafort earlier today found guilty of 8 of 18 charges, all related to bank and tax fraud. No Russia collusion. Michael Cohen pled guilty 8 counts of bank fraud, tax fraud, minor campaign finance violations. Far worse has been committed by others. No Russia collusion. And once again, the sentencing of Lieutenant General Michael Flynn delayed. Flynn pled guilty to lying to FBI investigators that didn't think he was lying. And no Russia collusion. George Papadopoulos now considering a withdrawal of his guilty plea. He lied to investigators. Nothing to do with Russia collusion. Coming up, we'll explain why each of these men were targeted by Team Mueller. None of it about Russia collusion. Just their connection to the president. Is it dangerous to be friends with Donald Trump? We're going to call out what is the blatant, single, most disgusting two-tier justice system that we've ever seen in our country's history. We'll show you how the president is reacting to all these breaking developments as he just wrapped up a massive rally in West Virginia. And finally tonight, we have such sad, disturbing news. The body of missing Iowa jogger Molly Tibbetts was found, an illegal immigrant, now charged with her murder. All right, it's time for tonight's breaking news you won't hear anywhere else, opening monologue. All right, buckle up, stay with us for the entire hour. We will give you information, I promise, and perspective that you will not get anywhere else, as the media is once again beside themselves with false reporting, speculation, and hysteria. Yes, Paul Manafort was found guilty after a Northern Virginia jury found him guilty of 8 out of 18 counts. Jurors forced a mistrial on the other 10 charges after becoming deadlocked. Now, more evidence, Mueller stacking charges he couldn't prove to scare Manafort, as Judge Ellis said in the beginning, into singing or composing, and he was never really ready for an actual trial. By the way, Manafort worked for Trump a little over 100 days, and as we've said so many times, these are decades-old bank charges, tax fraud charges, zero to do with Russia collusion, zero to do with Donald Trump or the Trump campaign. Now, meanwhile, more breaking news today, this time in New York. Michael Cohen, he pled guilty to 8 federal charges, including bank, tax fraud, 2 minor campaign finance violations. Far worse crimes, by the way, committed by others. They didn't get charged. Earlier today, Bret Baier raised this very, very important question. Let's take a look.
The campaign finance violation, because the way he phrased it, that he was directed by the candidate to do that and submitted that money to be repaid by the Trump organization, that is a direct liability. But I can already see the battle lines being drawn here legally, because I just got an email saying that the fact that he pleads guilty to campaign violations does not mean that the payments were criminal violations. This did not go to trial. And you have people like former FEC Chairman Bradley Smith saying that payment is not a violation, which is what Rudy Giuliani was saying in his interview earlier. So that you can already begin to see the Trump lawyers potentially and others making the case that this would not be a violation. Obviously, the prosecutor is saying that it is, and Michael Cohen is on the hook for it right now.
And meanwhile, many of the other charges against Michael Cohen surround, let's see, we go from Russia to the family taxi medallion company. Once again, these charges have nothing to do with Russian collusion. From Russia collusion to taxi cabs. Hello? Now, President Trump's attorney, Rudy Giuliani, released this statement. It reads, quote, "There is no allegation of any wrongdoing against the president in the government's charges against Mr. Cohen. It is clear that, as the prosecutor noted, Mr. Cohen's actions reflect a pattern of lies and dishonesties over a significant period of time." Now, while Michael Cohen did say today, I would argue, knowing him all the years I've known him, probably forced by prosecutors, he's changed his story about whether or not Trump knew about the payment to Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. Back in March, he claimed, quote, "Trump did not know that he paid Clifford the $130,000. A month earlier, the New York Times, Mr. Paper of Record, that said the same thing. He paid the money out of his own pocket, quote, without Trump's knowledge." And today, we learned one more piece of breaking news about another Mueller target, and that's former National Security Advisor Lieutenant General Michael Flynn. His sentencing has now been delayed for a fourth time. 2017, he pled guilty to lying to the FBI, even though James Comey later testified that, in fact, investigators did not believe that Flynn had intentionally lied. Again, this guilty plea, nothing to do with Russia. Russia to tax returns, to fraud, to bank applications, to taxi medallions, to lying to the FBI. Nothing about Russia. Neither did the guilty plea from the Trump campaign volunteer, George Papadopoulos, whose wife was on last night. He pled guilty to lying to investigators. His wife, Mrs. Papadopoulos, now weighing in on his legal options and that he may withdraw that plea. Without a doubt, let's be straightforward here. It is wrong. There are lessons to learn from today. Don't ever knowingly lie to the FBI. Do not lie on a bank loan application ever or commit bank fraud. Pay your taxes. But did we need Robert Mueller for all of this? Think about this. How do you go from an investigation into Russia collusion in the 2016 election, and this is what we have? Taxes from years and years ago? Bank fraud, medallions, lying to the FBI. Where's the Russia stuff? Would any of these people that we're talking about tonight have been investigated or charged if not for their connection to Donald Trump? Is it also a lesson? Okay, don't lie to the FBI, pay your taxes, don't lie in a bank application, don't be friends with Donald Trump? Is this not now the witch hunt the president has been saying, an attempt to turn the screws, as Judge Ellis says, about Manafort, to would-be witnesses to find dirt on one man? In other words, so that they'll sing or compose to either prosecute or impeach the president of the United States. And if so, how is that not political selective persecution and not prosecution? Now, I don't care if you're liberal or conservative, we better take a very close look at where this country is today. We did learn valuable lessons. Pay your taxes, don't lie on a loan application, don't lie to the FBI. But this is it? Robert Mueller? Are you proud of this? Did we need you for 500 days for this? How did we go from Russia collusion to this? Now, today, the president reacted to Mueller's ongoing witch hunt. Let's take a look at his reaction.
I feel badly for both. I must tell you that Paul Manafort's a good man. He was with Ronald Reagan. He was with a lot of different people over the years, and I feel very sad about that. It doesn't involve me, but I still feel, it's a very sad thing that happened. This has nothing to do with Russian collusion. This started as Russian collusion. This has absolutely nothing to do. This is a witch hunt, and it's a disgrace. But this has nothing to do what they started out, looking for Russians involved in our campaign. There were none. This is the way it ends up. And it was not the original mission, believe me. It was something very much different. So, had nothing to do with Russian collusion. We continue the witch hunt.
Hang on, I'm looking for Russians. I'm looking. Oh. Now, tonight, it's not funny, because these are real people's lives. These are real families. This is way beyond what this mandate was. And every American that cares about our constitutional republic, the rule of law, equal application of our laws, you better be concerned tonight. Now, in West Virginia, the president raised an important question. Where's the collusion? He raised it again. Let's watch.
Fake news and the Russian witch hunt. We got a whole big combination. Where is the collusion? They're still looking for collusion. Where is the collusion? Find some collusion. We want to find the collusion.
Hate to say it, equal justice under the law, equal application of our laws is dead. And I will explain in a minute. Cohen and Manafort are literally prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law for bank and for tax frauds, etc. Let's take a look at some prominent liberals tonight, shall we, that committed similar crimes. they didn't face the same consequences. Remember tax cheat Tim Geithner? Oh, it's a name you haven't heard in a while. Underpaid his taxes tens of thousands of dollars over the course of multiple years before becoming Obama's first Treasury Secretary. Whoops, no indictment for him. Remember Al Sharpton? Remember Al used to be a guest on this show, works at Conspiracy TV, MSNBC, reportedly once owed millions of dollars in back taxes to the IRS. He was also fined $285,000 by the FEC over an illicit political donation. Of course, Sharpton, he's enjoying his freedom, cushy job talking about Michael Cohen and everybody else over at NBC. And let's not forget about, remember former New York Congressman Charlie Rangel? Remember the picture of him laying on that beach chair? He failed to pay taxes on tens of thousands of dollars in real estate income. Rangel censored in the House of Representatives. He's now enjoying his retirement. Then there's former Democratic Senator Tom Daschle. Remember Rush used to talk about the Tom Daschle show? He failed to pay more than $128,000 in taxes. And look at this. Oh, even the Obama campaign in 2008, they were hit with a mere fine, which at the time was a lot, $375,000, for campaign reporting violations over $2 million worth. Cohen is now getting prison time. Somehow Team Mueller missed all of those crimes. Wait, because there was no connection to President Trump. In today's two-tier justice system, as a Democrat, clearly you can commit financial fraud and get away with it. By the way, that's just the tip of the iceberg. If you're a Democrat and you have subpoenaed information, well, first of all, you can mishandle and destroy classified information, which violates the Espionage Act clearly. You can have top intelligence, and then you can delete subpoenaed emails. Not one, not 10, 33,000 of them. And acid wash your hard drive with bleach bit and eliminate the evidence. And then have an aide smash up your devices with hammers and get away with it. And you can even have an exoneration written months before you're even investigated. And by the way, the guy that is doing the interview of you hates your opponent, loves you. Your name is Donald Trump, or you're associated with Donald Trump your entire life. It's going to be scoured for potential crimes. Well, your doors will be kicked down late at night, early in the morning raised. The screws are going to be turned, as Judge Ellis said, and they will ask you to sing or compose, or you'll go to jail for crimes that other people have committed and don't go to jail for. Ask Paul Manafort tonight. Ask Michael Cohen tonight. Ask General Flynn. Boy, he served his country for 30 years. Not even the guy that interviewed him at the FBI thought he lied. Not even Comey thought he lied. Not even Peter Strzok thought he lied. Ask George Papadopoulos. I bet he regrets volunteering for the Trump campaign. Just ask the White House counsel, Don McGahn. Oh, the White House counsel for the president interrogated by Mueller's team for 30 full hours. Trump thinks, his lawyers thought, well, we'll cooperate. We'll turn over 1.4 million documents. We'll cooperate with Mueller, and it'll go away because we didn't do anything wrong. And the most exculpatory evidence is in Comey's notes. I didn't collude. I didn't conspire. But if anybody on my team did, you got to hold them accountable. Those were in Comey's notes. Now, Mueller's witch hunt is not and has never been about Russia collusion. How did we get to taxi cabs and tax fraud and bank fraud and lies to the FBI? This is what we have been telling you for a long time. And we have the evidence. It is an attempt at a political takedown of the man that the deep state never wanted to be the president of the United States. I will tell you tonight that the sovereignty of your vote is now in question. Before we get to our guests, we have another important topic to cover. Now, for weeks, FoxNews.com has been following the heart-wrenching story out of Iowa. On July 18th, a 20-year-old college student, young girl, all a future potential life ahead of her, Molly Tibbetts, went missing. Today, sadly, her body was recovered. And now the police have arrested an illegal immigrant they believe is responsible for her murder. Watch this.
A first-degree murder charge was filed today in connection with the disappearance of Molly Tibbetts, who was last seen jogging in Brooklyn, Iowa on July 18, 2018. A complaint and affidavit names Christian Bahina Rivera, age 24, who resides in rural Poweshiek County, and he has been charged with murder in the first degree. We have confirmed with Homeland Security investigations that he is an illegal alien, and we believe he has been in this area now for 4 to 7 years.
What happened to this young woman, Molly Tibbetts, is a senseless, evil, horrific crime. Now we believe and charges against an illegal immigrant. Tonight we extend our deepest condolences, our prayers to her family and her friends. We'll get to all of that in the course of the show. And we also have the great one, Mark Levin, is going to be joining us. We got a lot of reaction to get to. We've only begun to touch the surface, but joining us first for reaction to our developments, we have former federal prosecutor himself. He worked at the Southern District of New York for 20 years on big cases like the Blind Shade case and the First Trade Center bombing. Andrew McCarthy, civil and criminal defense attorney David Schoen. Andy, let's start here with, I think, what is so obvious. How did we get from Russia collusion to 5 years of taxes in the case of Paul Manafort and tax and bank charges against him? And by the way, I'm advising everyone, pay your taxes, don't lie on loan applications, and don't lie to the FBI. 3 lessons we can take out tonight. How did we get from Russia collusion to this?
Sean, I agree with what you said about the two-tiered justice system, because I don't think that you could justify how the same or similar cases have been handled on these 2 different categories of people. I'm not as convinced that what we started with was Russian collusion. I really think that what we started with was Russia's interference in the election, and that still
that's what they were calling it,
supposed
though, right?
to be, at least. Well, no, they said the collusion was one thread of an investigation into Russia's involvement in the election. I'm pretty convinced that Mueller is not pursuing a collusion case against
it's an obstruction
President
case.
Trump. I think it is an obstruction case. And as far as Manafort goes, I don't think that I don't think Mueller thinks Manafort has anything with respect to Trump campaign collusion with Russia that Mueller couldn't already get from Gates, who is Manafort's partner, who's been cooperating for 6 months. I think his interest in Manafort has to do with exactly Manafort's connections to Russia, not necessarily the Trump campaign. And until I see something different, that's what I've concluded.
You know the Southern District of New York. I mean, it has the reputation of probably being, in terms of federal prosecution, the toughest one in the country. And you worked there 20 years, over 2 decades of your life. Rudy Giuliani worked there, interestingly. Very smart, aggressive, tough attorneys that worked there.
He hired me.
Oh, Rudy hired you? I didn't know.
Right.
Okay, we get some trivia in. But the heart of what they're saying, so I have all these examples where Michael Cohen had said that the president didn't know, that he did it on his own, and that he didn't do it with any expecting payback. Michael Cohen says today, at the direction of the president. There are numerous times that he said it. Why do I think that that was the special sauce that the prosecution wanted? Because remember, this was fed to them and served up to them by Robert Mueller. And again, we go to taxi medallions,
right.
Tax fraud. And another big question as a side note, if you can answer both. Would any of these people, Flynn, Papadopoulos, Manafort, or Cohen, be in trouble tonight in any way if it weren't for the issue of Russia, which didn't come up in any case?
Yeah, I think, Sean, I think the last question is the easiest one to answer. These guys got on the government's crosshairs because of their connections to first candidate, now President Trump. I don't think there's any question about that. But I do think that the Cohen case ended up in the Southern District because Mueller didn't see him, Cohen, as somebody who was going to advance his Russia investigation. And the Southern District had a different line of interest in Cohen.
But let's focus on the main. But when he says it's the
think
direction of the president and he previously had not, why do I think that that had to be a big part of what they wanted
Sean,
from Cohen
Sean,
to get the
notice, though,
deal he got? Because he was otherwise facing 65 years.
Yeah, but Sean, it's a straight-up guilty plea. It's not a cooperation agreement. I don't think they regard him as a witness. I think for precisely the reason you've pointed out, you know, he's made statements that are all over the map. They did elicit that from him today when he gave his allocution at his guilty plea, but I think if they regarded him as a valuable witness or a cooperator, you'd see a very different kind of plea agreement.
Yeah, I do agree with that, too. And, David, you've seen a lot of these cases over the years, and we talked about at length. Look, there are Russian issues here. Hillary paid for a phony Russian dossier with funneled money through a law firm to a op research group that hired a foreign national, which I thought was bad for our elections. And he came up with Russian lies that were disseminated to the American people to impact, that were never verified, never corroborated, to impact our election. And then such information was also used as the bulk of information to get FISA warrants on a Trump campaign associate. Russian lies were used, and I believe fraud was committed before 4 FISA court judges. None of these people, nor is Hillary Clinton, who I think has the most open and shut case on obstruction, none of them are indicted today. Why?
Right.
What should the American people take from that?
The answer why is purely a political one. I think the American people are entitled to hold the United States attorney to his word today when he said the message from the Cohen case is that the rule of law is to be applied equally and evenly across the board. We haven't seen that yet. Mr. McCarthy is exactly right that the mandate started out the question of Russian interference. I think the case today, Manafort, perfectly illustrates how wrong they went in the breadth of the mandate that was given, that Judge Ellis examined and found this case fell within that breadth. It's so far beyond that, has nothing whatsoever to do with the president, certainly, but the charges today, nothing whatsoever to do with Russia. And, of course, your original question, how did it get in the Southern District? We know, for example, a member of the Mueller team comes out of the unit that prosecuted Mr. Cohen. Andrew Goldstein comes from that unit. Let's hold the Southern District to their word, and let's get past these cases that have nothing to do with the president and get on with the business that you've reported day after day. The misconduct before the FISA court is outrageous. The American people cannot withstand that kind of treachery before that kind of secret court in an ex parte proceeding. We have to have the answers and full disclosure.
You know, isn't it happen every day, Andy McCarthy, that people that commit fraud on their taxes and people that commit campaign finance violations, Obama $2 million worth. Michael Cohen's about $300,000. They only paid a $375,000 fine. I used the Hillary case. I used the fraud before the FISA judges. Andy, I wouldn't lie to any judge ever. It's dumb. I wouldn't also, if I had a subpoena by Congress for my emails, I wouldn't delete them. I wouldn't acid wash my hard drives and beat up or have somebody beat up my phones. And I think America has to look tonight and ask itself, is this a witch hunt, as the president is saying, based on what we know are real crimes, and some of them actually have to do with Russia?
Sean, I don't think anybody objective could look at the way that the Clinton emails investigation was handled and the way the Trump campaign has been pursued and say that there's a single standard of justice. I just don't see how that could be. At the same time, I don't want to see Mueller pursuing the investigators or what happened in the Hillary case. As I understand it, that's being looked at by the Justice Department, by the Inspector General, and by Mr. Huber, the U.S. Attorney from Utah, who the Attorney General assigned to this. I think we ought to let them do their work. I'd rather see them do it than see Mueller do it. I think Mueller should stay focused on what he's doing and bring it to an end.
All right, Andy McCarthy, David Schoen, thank you both for being with us. Now, earlier tonight at his West Virginia rally, President Trump asked, where's the Russia collusion? Here's what he said. Apparently, we don't have that. We had it earlier. Anyway, joining us now with the latest on today's news is Fox News Chief National Correspondent Ed Henry. Ed.
Sean, good to see you. You're right. And before that rally, the president called the Robert Mueller investigation again a witch hunt. What's interesting is the Michael Cohen case that you mentioned could prove to be more damaging for the president because in that case, he's directly implicated by Cohen. A far cry from the Paul Manafort case, which had major developments today. That has nothing to do with the president, nothing to do with 2016, nothing to do with Russia collusion. The former Trump campaign chair was found guilty on 5 counts of filing false income tax returns, 1 count of failing to file a report of a foreign bank account, 2 charges of bank fraud. The jury could not reach a verdict on 10 other counts against Manafort. Prosecutors have until the end of the month to decide on a possible retrial. There's also the possibility Manafort will be pardoned by the president, who declared again, as I noted, that the Mueller probe is a witch hunt. He said he was deeply frustrated about that. The president, though, said nothing in his comments about the Cohen case, leaving it to his attorney, Rudy Giuliani, to provide this written statement tonight. Quote, "There is no allegation of any wrongdoing against the president in the government's charges against Mr. Cohen. It is clear that, as the prosecutor noted, Mr. Cohen's actions reflect a pattern of lies and dishonesty over a significant period of time. But remember, Cohen's plea deal alleges he broke the law to influence the 2016 election on behalf of a candidate, that candidate, of course, being Donald Trump. Cohen will get prison time of somewhere between 43 and 63 months, charges of bank fraud, tax evasion, and the campaign finance charges involving payments to 2 women who alleged affairs with the president that he has strongly denied, Stormy Daniels and Karen McDougal. Now, remember, Rudy Giuliani told you in that exclusive interview back in May that no campaign finance law was broken. This plea deal contradicts that and is going to raise questions about whether anyone else in the Trump campaign could be implicated, Sean.
All right, Ed Henry with that report. Thank you. Joining us now with the reaction, author of the New York Times bestseller 3 weeks in a row, The Russian Hoax, the illicit scheme to clear Hillary Clinton, frame Donald Trump, the heart of what I'm discussing tonight, and Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett, Fox News contributor Sarah Carter, who's also been covering and breaking a lot of news that apparently doesn't end up in indictments of anybody, which is the point here. You know, look, I stand by what I say. Pay your taxes.
Sure.
If you're applying for a loan, don't lie.
Right.
Don't lie to the FBI.
That's right.
Okay, all lessons everybody should learn. Has nothing to do with Russia. But America should be asking a question tonight if we have a 2-tier justice system.
Oh, we totally do. I mean, there's one for Donald Trump.
So we don't have a constitutional republic.
No, Hillary Clinton violated the Federal Campaign Election Act in a criminal way. There's no investigation of her for that. And yet here you see the feds pressuring Cohen to try to implicate President Trump. There are 2 reasons why his payment in exchange for a non-disclosure agreement is not an illegal campaign contribution. The law says if there is a dual or secondary purpose, it's not illegal. Here, President Trump had personal and commercial reasons. Second of all, the Federal Campaign Election Act is a specific intent crime if you're going to criminalize it. And that means you have to prove, quote, knowingly and willfully committed a violation of the campaign law. Who is that steeped in campaign election laws to know that a non-disclosure agreement in exchange for money would be a violation? So you can't even prove the case.
This is an amazing thing, too. And look, I actually think that they wanted that line. At the behest.
Oh, they did. They pressured him for that one line.
It was 65 years.
They didn't care about anything else but that one line.
Agreed. And you know what? After all the other times that he said just the opposite,
right.
He was pressured to do it. And basically, if you're looking at 65 years or 4 or 3, I'm going to take the deal.
Right.
Most people would take the deal. Sarah, your investigative reporting has shown us that we do have Russian issues here. A bought and paid for dossier, funneled money through a law firm to a Fusion GPS, which is an op research, to a foreign national, which I thought was bad. Apparently not if you're Hillary Clinton. On top of her obstruction case, then that money is used as the basis to lie to 4 FISA court judges, 4 separate occasions, 4 applications. It's all false Russian information. And we're talking about taxes. And the only thing that's common is they're friends with Trump in some way.
Incredible violations, Sean. And remember, they did not disclose that. Hillary Clinton campaign did not disclose that on their FEC. They didn't disclose that they were paying a foreign spy, basically through a U.S. research firm, for a dossier filled with lies from the Russians. That was something that they kept very secret until the Washington Post actually broke that story. And we've reported over and over again, document after documents, where there was actual collusion between the DOJ and the FBI. How many people at the FBI have been removed or demoted? Over 25 people, Sean, and still nothing. And I'm going to say this: Rod Rosenstein gave carte blanche over this special counsel for Robert Mueller, and Rod Rosenstein himself signed off on the 4th FISA application on Carter Page, which means he would have known everything, or should have known everything, that was contained in those FISA applications, those previous FISA applications. This is really incredible. And he wrote the letter, remember, wrote the letter for President Trump to fire Comey. So if this is an obstruction case, isn't he a witness or a co-conspirator? Why is Rod Rosenstein in charge of this? And where is Attorney General Jeff Sessions? When is he going to stand up and do something about this? We don't even know what's happened with Huber. We don't even know what he's doing. And as far as the Inspector General's report, well, that could just come out next year. There needs to be a special counsel, according to a number of sources that I've spoken with. There needs to be a special counsel in order for this not to be a two-tier justice system.
So well said.
There's a reason why Rod Rosenstein has been obstructing Congress and, in my judgment, obstructing justice, because he's knee-deep in all of this. He signed off on the renewal without the required
third renewal,
evidence.
The 4th FISA.
That's right. And so Rod Rosenstein is engaged in what I suspect is a very deliberate cover-up. He's not only covering up the wrongdoing of the FBI and the Department of Justice, and by the way, taking no action against Bruce Ohr for what he did, but he's also covering up his own role.
You have 25 people, top people, between the FBI and the DOJ that have either been fired, demoted, or resigned.
Right.
Okay, the top people. This isn't the rank and file. And I'm just wondering, and I think America should wonder tonight. Again, we go from Russia collusion, and we end up with tax issues going back years ago in both cases, and bank applications that have nothing to do with the campaign, nothing to do with Trump, nothing to do with Russia years ago. Now we've got into taxi medallion land, which is nothing to do with anything. And I think Americans are saying, wait a minute. In this campaign of 2016, Hillary did do these things.
Sure.
And forget about, you can even add to the list that she cheated Bernie Sanders out of the nomination. Nobody seems to care but me. Poor Bernie. Bernie doesn't even care. So then she does her bit with the email subpoenaed. Then she does her bit to pay for the phony Russian dossier. Then they disseminate it to influence the American people. And then it's used for the bulk of information for a FISA. It seems to me that the perspective is so far off here that the president's analogy that it's a witch hunt is accurate.
Absolutely. When James Comey cleared Hillary Clinton in the face of overwhelming evidence of guilt, he simultaneously launched the investigation of Trump in direct violation, as I explain in the book, of FBI guidelines. Then the special counsel was also illegitimate. This has always been an investigation in search of a crime, but the federal regulations say there must be a stated crime. There was none.
Sarah will give you the last word.
Look, Sean, they are trying to force people to compose. They're targeting everyone around President Trump. This is pretty obvious what's happening here. The only thing I can hope for is that actually Huber is doing his job. The Attorney General will listen, and that the special counsel will be appointed.
All right. Thank you both. Appreciate it. Your book got to the whole heart of it right there. And here we are today, taxi medallions. Sad.
Yeah, it is.
When we come back, he's called the Great One for a reason. Mark Levin weighs in, and much more. Straight ahead. Right here with reaction to all of today's breaking news. He's the host of the #1 show, Sunday nights, 10 Eastern, Life, Liberty, Levin, right here on the Fox News channel, host of CRTV's Levin TV. We call him the Great One for a reason, Mark Levin. All right, Mark, I mean, there are some lessons here. I agree that you shouldn't lie to the FBI. Everyone agrees with that. I also agree that you should pay your taxes. I also agree that you better not lie in a bank loan application. Mark, how did we get from Russia and that this is it after we're almost at 500 days?
All right, I want to address Michael Cohen. How did we get to that? I want to help the law professors, the constitutional experts, the criminal defense lawyers, the former prosecutors, and of course the professors. I want to help them understand what the law is. The general counsel for the Clinton mob family, Lanny Davis, he had his client plead to 2 counts of criminality that don't exist. these campaign finance violations that all over TV they're saying implicates the President of the United States directly. First, let's back up. It is a guilty plea. It is a plea bargain between a prosecutor and a criminal who doesn't want to spend the rest of his life in prison. That is not precedent. That applies only to that specific case. Nobody cites plea bargains for precedent. That's number one. Number two, just because a prosecutor says that somebody violated a campaign law doesn't make it so. He's not the judge. He's not the jury. We didn't adjudicate anything. It never went to court. That's number two. A campaign expenditure under our federal campaign laws is an expenditure solely for campaign activity. A candidate who spends his own money or even corporate money for an event that occurred not as a result of the campaign, it is not a campaign expenditure. Let me give a few examples to help people understand this, especially the American people. Let's say, I wrote these down. Let's say a candidate had said, we owe vendors a whole lot of money. We've had disputes with them, but I want you to go ahead and pay them. I'm a candidate. I don't want all this negative publicity. So he says to his private lawyer, you pay them, I'll reimburse you, get it done. Is that illegal? It's perfectly legal. Yet according to the prosecution of the Southern District of New York, it's paid at the direction of the candidate to influence an election. Yes, Mr. Prosecutor, how stupid is your point? It's not a crime. More. Let's say this candidate settles a lawsuit that was initiated before he becomes a candidate, and he says to his personal lawyer, I want you to settle that lawsuit. You can use my corporate funds, my private funds, whatever it is. That is perfectly legal, too. The prosecutor would say, but that influenced the election. So what? There's certain things you do that influence an election that are legal, certain things you do that influence an election that are illegal. Let's say a candidate gets a non-disclosure agreement from a disgruntled employee, wants to quiet that disgruntled employee as he goes into the election. He pays the funds out of his pocket or through his corporation. Perfectly legal. Nothing here was spent out of the campaign. Nothing was done with the campaign or to the campaign. This is exactly what the federal law is. And Mr. Lanny Davis had his client plead guilty to 2 offenses that aren't offenses that the prosecutor insisted were offenses. That's why he's no good. That is Michael Cohen against Donald Trump. Donald Trump's in the clear. Let's say Donald Trump even directed Michael Cohen to make payments in non-disclosure agreements. So what? He's allowed to do that. Now, here's my question. Has the Southern District of New York ever paid money in a non-disclosure agreement with any of its employees? How about any U.S. Attorney's Office in the United States? How about the Department of Justice? How about any business? How about any union? How about the DNC? How about members of Congress? It's done all the time. But call it hush money. And all of us, hush money. Oh, they can't pay hush money. Well, it is hush money. It's legal. It's a contract. It's done all the time. Now, what does Mr. Mueller have left? It's work. He's chasing the Manhattan Madam. Who the hell's the Manhattan Madam? I don't know. Now he's interviewing, he's dragging her in front of the grand jury. What's next? The Manhattan Madam. He's got Manafort where he wants him on banking charges. He set up a few guys like Flynn, who's gotten in trouble. Now they have Cohen. What do they have? They have nothing. I'll tell you what they have. Mr. Mueller, as a federal prosecutor, is preparing his impeachment report, which is an unconstitutional activity. Mr. Mueller is supposed to be non-political. He's not supposed to be preparing impeachment reports. Mr. Mueller, I told you before, you can't indict a sitting president. I told you that 15 months ago. Now you figured it out. You and Rosenstein figured it out. Now you and Rosenstein are trying to figure out what to do with the subpoena. You see, Sean, Giuliani was on your show the other day, or somebody's show. He said, why do they take 2 or 3 weeks? I'll tell you why they take 2 or 3 weeks. Because Mr. Mueller has to consult Mr. Rosenstein, his boss, to figure out what to do with this subpoena. I'll tell you what happens when they issue that subpoena. The President of the United States takes it all the way to the Supreme Court, and what does he cite? Department of Justice memos. What else does he cite? The Constitution of the United States. So this is going to be an impeachment battle in the end. The President of the United States, if he doesn't get involved in the perjury trap, think about that. They don't have a crime. He needs this interview to create a crime against the President of the United States, this prosecutor. Well, that's pretty damn outrageous. So in any event, I want the news media to understand, you know what took place in the Southern District of New York? Nothing that matters. Zippo.
You know, Mark,
there was no violation of federal campaign laws. Lanny Davis blew it. Lanny Davis, he puts out a tweet today. Today, Cohen stood up and testified under oath that Donald Trump directed him to commit a crime. You're a dummy, Lanny, by making payments to 2 women for the principal purpose of influencing an election. If those payments were a crime for Michael Cohen, then why would they be a crime for Donald Trump? They weren't a crime for Michael Cohen. He screwed himself, and they're not a crime for Donald Trump either. Now move along and go back into your corner with Hillary Clinton.
But, well, obviously, he's a huge Clinton sycophant. So this 2016 campaign, we're, 77 days out, is now becoming, as I have said for a long time, it's about impeachment, keeping Obamacare, them wanting their crumbs back, eliminating ICE, open borders, and stopping the investigation into what I say is the biggest abuse of power. Here's what I want to ask you. So we now have Hillary Rodham Clinton obstructing, violating the Espionage Act, no indictment. We now have her paying for what turns out to be a foreign entity, a foreign agent, putting together Russian lies that are disseminated to the American people to influence an election, lies, never verified, never corroborated, then put as the bulk of information in 4 FISA warrants. Comey, Sally Yates, Rod Rosenstein, they all signed off, and they all said, they swore, they put their good name and credibility behind it. I don't see Comey indicted. I don't see any Hillary Clinton indictments. I don't see any crimes that are being pursued here. Barack Obama had, what, $2 million in campaign finance violations. He just paid a fine.
Can I interrupt for a second?
Yeah, go ahead. Interrupt on my own show.
The head of the FBI is not the head of the FBI anymore. He's a confessed leaker, and he's under investigation by the Inspector General. The deputy FBI director was fired and is under criminal investigation. Mr. Strzok, who was the head counterintelligence investigator, was fired, and he's under investigation, I believe, or will be, or should be, under investigation as well. That's the top tier of the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I've never heard of anything like this before. You have a mole in the Deputy Attorney General's office who's working with Strzok, who's been fired. His wife works for the Fusion GPS, pushing out the opposition research against the President of the United States, getting it in front of the FISA court through the FBI. Bruce Orr, who served for the Deputy Attorney General of the United States. And there's tons more. You have FISA court judges that have never been held to account.
Fraud.
You had an application that was filed with the FISA court. They didn't say who paid for the opposition research that was used to violate their rules.
I got to run, Mark.
Yeah, we need a special counsel now for that.
You know, some great, smart constitutional lawyer once wrote a book, and in the book he said this is a post-constitutional America. Oh, that was you. We're there. Mark, thank you. Life, Liberty, Levin, Sunday night, 10 Eastern, right here on Fox. When we come back, we'll have a live report from Iowa, the very latest. This horrific murder of this young, innocent Iowa college student, Molly Tibbetts, murdered by an illegal immigrant. Full reaction. Geraldo, Dr. Gorka next.